Back in 2013, Ubisoft gave us our first gameplay footage of The Division. The game they showed initially stunned audiences with its amazing graphical quality. The level of detail in that demo alone was years ahead of pretty much any other game that existed. We saw characters closing doors in cover, we saw glass breaking realistically as it got shot, we saw friends joining in on a mobile device to mark enemies that were out of sight, so that the rest of the team could kill him by destroying the plywood billboard that he was hiding behind. And then we actually saw the characters reaching out to pick up items that were just hanging out in the environment. And at first we thought, oh, that's not a big deal. Then he opened a loot box, pulled a weapon out, and put it right into his hands with no menus or loading screens at all. Around the end of the demo, they're showing off some of the size and detail of the maps we're going to be playing in, when all of a sudden players come out of nowhere and ambush them while they're trying to extract their loot. And we're like, oh shit, this is going to be an MMO too? And then it goes to a map view and then it zooms out showing all kinds of player activity happening all over the city. In 2013 we were shown what could have been one of the best games of all time. And what we got instead was small and lackluster in comparison. The map size was much smaller than we promised and the PvP turned out to be not nearly as exciting as shown in the demo. It ended up being just a whole bunch of people trying to goad each other into going rogue. And once the combat actually starts, it's just a question of who has their ultimate up and who has the better guns. Imbalance in the game's PvP is frustratingly obvious. And not to mention boring, since you're essentially just standing in front of a player shooting them till they die. The awesome looting we saw in the demo where the guy just picks up the gun and starts using it isn't there anymore. The tactically destructible environments from the demo have been reduced to mostly cosmetic. What you see here is one of the few exceptions we found and it was really buggy. Now I will say that while a lot of things have been watered down, some of the glass in the game still breaks dynamically just like in the demo, but it's clear some of it's been watered down as some windows will not break like that. Interactions with civilians in the game have also been dumbed down as it's essentially just a random item that they need for no reason. And then of course that sweet holographic map they showed in the demo is not there anymore. Fortunately it's not all bad news, so let's talk about what's good about this game. While I like to bitch and moan that the looting isn't as cinematic as it was in the demo, it's still one of the better looting systems I've seen in an RPG, even if the drop rate for performance mods is way too high. But when you're not getting performance mods from the dead boss you just killed, it's actually pretty satisfying to loot good items, and the somewhat randomized stats on each item make it worthwhile to keep going and keep trying to find better items. While the loot-based formula has been done before plenty of times, it's still an addictive formula, so it's not a bad thing that it's in here. It's the kind of system you see in Diablo and why that game's so popular, and it makes this game pretty addicting too sometimes. And it's neat how the loot works in the Dark Zone, how you know the gear you're getting and what you're extracting before you actually extract it, but you only know the specific stats when you actually finish extracting it. So sometimes the extractions themselves get a bit boring.
You've got a bird inbound on your position.
Moving right along, the game has a pretty neat weapon customization system where you can pick all the attachments and weapon skins that you want to put on your gun. And the level of detail you find in the environment in some places is astounding. Zooming in on objects will show an absurd amount of detail, but the game's visuals really shine at night, especially in places like Times Square. I mean, don't take my word for it, just take a second to look at this. Pretty neat. Of course, like I said earlier, the glass breaks realistically still. I was also pretty impressed with some of the maneuvers the AIs would make in combat. They'd try to flank you, they'd try to hack your drones when you send them at them, they'd use grenades to flush you out of cover and then flank you once you're stunned and annihilate you. I mean, it was frustrating, but it was also pretty impressive. Gotta give the AI props. There's a pretty neat climbing and clambering system where you can pretty much climb any object that looks like you can climb. The cover system is also pretty top notch, and the cover-to-cover move system is pretty on point, and it usually takes you where you want to go along the safest route you can take. This lets you get some pretty good positions against your enemies. While the PvP itself is still balls, the rogue system in the Dark Zone is on point with what they wanted to accomplish. Attacking another player who is not rogue will flag you as rogue. Going rogue puts you on the map for everyone in the Dark Zone to see and kill you for experience and monies. The more people you kill, the more your rogue rank increases until you get a manhunt. Dying as a rogue is incredibly punishing, and you'll lose more from dying than you'll gain from surviving. And that neat little leave group and betray your teammates thing from the 2015 demo is still in the game, so that's nice. But it's not as easy as it was in the demo, and unsurprisingly your friends will get pretty pissed at you if you do this to them. This whole system accomplishes exactly what it was set out to do. It creates mistrust for anyone not in your party, but not in a way that makes you want to kill everyone on sight like other games like Rust, for example. Some of the Dark Zone servers seem to have like a police force of rogue hunters that just go around killing anyone who goes rogue. So because of the horrible imbalance in the PvP, hunting rogues isn't very satisfying sometimes. In fact, it's often best to just try to avoid rogues when you see them. Let the police take care of it. Going back to the looting in the game, the prefixes for weapons add a nice touch to the looting. The weapon prefixes add some variety to the loot. For example, the first wave M1A compared to a classic M1A will be visibly different weapons. The character customization system is pretty awesome too, because it lets you change your appearance on the fly and just keep moving with it. So at its core, this game has a solid, addicting, and fun formula. So why do I dislike it so much? What's wrong with it? Why isn't it a perfect score? Well, let's talk about that then. The biggest problem that I want to get out of the way first is that the endgame sucks. There's not a lot to do and it's just kind of boring, and I often find myself just fucking around doing nothing. The open world plays little to no role in the endgame, and what it really boils down to is completing the story missions just on harder difficulties this time. And once you get good gear, there aren't many more challenging difficulties above challenging mode. Doing them every day for the dailies gets really repetitive. Most fun you'll have with the game's endgame is doing Dark Zone, but that gets old after a while. It also gets frustrating not only because of the PvP, but because some people will just kill the name mob at a landmark and leave some random trash for you to kill. They did recently add a new raid or incursion or whatever you want to call it, but it's really kind of lackluster. It does add some cool new enemies like drones and APCs, but all it is really is just one room, 15 waves, and 3 bombs you gotta put on the APC. Although the APC is cool, but I wish they would have applied that kind of boss mechanic to regular missions instead of just dudes with guns. It would have been nice to have some more bosses like hijacked jeeps with machine guns and stuff like that. The second biggest complaint with the game is travel. You will be doing a lot of running in this game, and I mean a lot. Before I started editing the video, I had to clear some of the footage of just me running out of my computer so I'd have more room. You run everywhere and it takes so much of your time. May as well call it Running Simulator 2016. And while it clearly wasn't the focus of the game, story and characters are incredibly weak. I can only really remember the name of one character off the top of my head. And it's really kind of a bummer because the opening cutscene seems so dramatic and it made the story seem like it was going to be something great. What it really boils down to is, oh no, we need to get our base operational, oh no, these people are doing something bad, so go kill them. Hey, you did good, sport, but your work isn't over yet. Keep your eyes peeled for DLC. I honestly feel like the Tom Clancy license is what's holding back the story so much. I mean, I never thought I'd say this, but I feel like the game would be 1,000 times better if there were zombies instead of the flu. It relies way too heavily on the promise of DLC. For example, I've heard they've had a Central Park themed expansion planned, and I feel like that kind of thing should have been in the game at the get-go. It's the same problem Destiny had. They're releasing an incomplete game and then releasing the rest as DLC for you to buy. The randomly rolled weapon talents in all the weapons are kind of frustrating, honestly. The talents themselves are a good idea, but they have ridiculous stat requirements, so if you're going with a firearms build, you have to take away some of your firearms in favor of stamina to activate a talent. Trying to balance your stats like this to activate talents is kind of frustrating, and I've kind of learned to just ignore the talents and focus on the stat I want to actually have. To get more in depth with the PvP, it really only boils down to 3 factors, and none of them are skill. And that's how geared are you, what ultimate are you using, and is it up right now? If you're using anything other than the blue ultimate, you're fucked once a player comes and attacks you. And the matchmaking in the Dark Zone is pretty horrid, so you'll get triple teamed by overgeared people often. Not to mention the PvP is riddled with hackers and exploiters and glitchers. You got speed hackers, one-shot hackers, and people who will hide in buildings so you can't reach them. And Ubisoft has so far done nothing to punish them, just like they've done nothing about the horrible glitches that are in the game. Missions not starting when you try to activate them, people pointing down but shooting straight. Getting stuck in the environment all the time so you have to kill yourself to respawn. And these are just the bugs that I've experienced. People have reported many more bugs. The character creation is delivered in a nice way, but it's really just silver lining on a really terrible creation system. It's incredibly limited with pretty much like 5 faces to choose from, I think. a few hairstyles, and a ridiculous amount of war paints and tattoos. I don't know why they focus on that so much. And why are glasses part of the customization and not the appearance menu? Why can't I loot more glasses? While the weather effects can be neat, the fog in this game is fucking blinding. Combine that with all the bright lights around the city, and the fact that the AI can see right through the fog. While I like the system for the appearance menu, the actual items you can collect for it are really boring and samey. It's all pretty much just different colored winter gear. All the unique outfits are in DLC and redemption rewards. And like I said, some aspects of the environment, the detail really flops, especially in reflections. So what do I think they could have done to make this game better? So I'm gonna try to avoid talking about the obvious stuff like bringing back the old world map. The first thing I would change is how different the Dark Zone and the regular open world are. Once you get to the end game, the regular open world doesn't really feel like an MMO, it's just sort of a mission hub. So I'd put everything in the Dark Zone, from extractions to contaminated loot to other players to the rogue system in the open world. And then make the Dark Zone a pure PvP zone with no rogue system at all, and everyone can kill anyone. There's already separate brackets for levels and gear scores, so it wouldn't be a huge problem to balance. And there'd be less rogues in the open world, since all the people who want to just run around PvP would go to the Dark Zone. The ammo boxes in the missions are also kind of a hassle when everyone needs to restock at the same time, and you can't have everyone restock at the same time. There should be multiple ammo boxes so everyone can restock at the same time. I also feel like the armor pieces should have options to hide them if you want, so that you can just show up in a suit if you want. The ultimates in the game are also pretty boring. I would have changed that. For example, make all the Link's healer abilities, add rockets like we saw in the demo, flamethrowers for DPS specs, add a cool wider shield that lets you use your primary weapon for tanks, that kind of thing. Like, the ultimates are boring as they are. Healers can have some kind of long range battle res that'll revive players even after they bleed out. There's also a lot of untapped potential for weapon variety in the game. While I like the idea that every weapon can have multiple variations, there's a lot of weapons in the real world that are unused. There's machine pistols, not to mention different kinds of assault rifles. There's just a ton of weapons in real life that aren't used in the game, and they should. The stat requirements for weapon talents infuriated me, so I would instead make it no requirements, and every talent has modifiers where you'll have that talent be a lot more effective if you have a lot of firearms and a little bit more effective if you have electronics. Kind of like the stat scaling in Dark Souls. So I'm gonna have to give this game 2 separate scores because the patch did fix a lot of stuff. So at launch, I have to give it a 6 out of 10. It's good, not great at all. And then after the update, they improved a lot of the endgame problems, but there's still a severe lack of content. 7 is about as high as I'm gonna make the score though, no matter how good the next DLC is, because whatever it's gonna be should have been in at launch.